All right, so everybody, appreciate you being here. It's a good crowd. We've got some other things going on, but we're happy that everybody's here. So Eric and I go way back. Not really. We met in a bike shop. I heard Eric talking about this and that, just a couple of things. And I kind of like slowly moved over there and I'm like, hey, what's your name? And that's how we got to know each other. So we've had a couple conversations, but what I've learned from Eric is that he has a mindset that really has driven his professional career. And he's a serial entrepreneur. I mean, he's just continually trying to figure out what is going on, what's the next best thing. And he's got a long history of success. Maybe a little bit of failure. We might hear of some of that failure, but I've learned that there is success in the failure that we experience at times. So there were a couple things that in a conversation that I had with Eric that kind of helped me understand just the mindset that he has, and that I hope that he gets to that today, but you'll learn a little bit more about really what it takes to have the passion, the drive, and how to go about being that entrepreneur. But we're grateful that he's here. His wife is in the audience. We're grateful that you're here too. Thank you for joining us. We want to recognize Bex for being our sponsor. There will be some Bex giveaway certificates at the end, so stick around for the drawing, and we will do that drawing. So welcome, Eric.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate you, man. So just out of curiosity, because nobody wants to come to something like this and not get some sort of value out of it. So my intent is to give a nugget or two of value that you're like, you know what, that was actually worthwhile. Because otherwise we're all just wasting our time, right? It will have been a waste for you. It definitely will have been a waste for me. And one thing that I think is significantly important is understanding that you have to capitalize on your time. Bank accounts ebb and flow. Some of you are like, no, actually they just flow. When does it ebb? Well, that comes, but the idea is, but money goes up and down all around. You buy something, we met at a bike shop, I've dropped some money on bikes. Well, guess what? The next day I figured out how to make the money to bring it back in the account, that kind of thing. But the thing you don't have is a replenishment of time. Now we say that sometimes and we don't think about how significant and impactful that is, but utilization of our time and getting value for our time is super important. So that's the first nugget. Make sure you're utilizing your time and understanding that sometimes you might have to pay for an education or pay for something that's of value, but it'll be worth it if it saves you time or it's worth your time, if that makes sense for everybody. Just by way of introduction, my name is Eric Bascom, and this is my beautiful wife, Amy. You cannot be successful if you're married currently. This is true. Whether you're not, I'm not saying go change your choice, but you cannot be successful as an entrepreneur or a business person without a supportive wife. Otherwise, if you're not careful, she'll think you're a wackadoo and will be antagonistic to what you're trying to accomplish, and it'll never work. It'll never work. So I say that to say that my wife is also entrepreneurial in spirit. In fact, she's had some successes and some failures of businesses on her own. The way that that's looked to this point is she'll say, hey, sweetheart, I would like to do a business. I'm like, okay, cool. What are you thinking? And she might say something like, I want to sell calendars. Like, I think here or planners, excuse me. See, I'm looking at a calendar planner. In my world, I'm like, meh, what is that? But she wanted to do these planners. And so the idea is here, these cutesy planners. Any of y'all seen these? Like pre-technology, these were kind of a big deal. There's actually a company called Mormon Mom Planners for those people that are associated with the LDS faith. But it's these cutesy things. You put stickers and all this kind of stuff, and you're writing notes and all that kind of thing. And I'm thinking to myself, this is not going to work because we're in a technological age. But I didn't, stop her. So we did several thousand planners, and we went to these little road shows, and we did all these things. And then we ended up saying, you know what, this is not that fun, and there's not that many people that want old school planners. And so we took a big loss on it, but we got a tax write-off, and it worked out great. And then subsequent to that, she came up with an idea to do embroidery, like custom embroidery and uniforming. And so she worked literally for 1 week and secured the biggest client in our area and then gave them a boutique service. And she ended up doing the uniforming for boots and for pants and for all their shirts and all their hats. And then she's like, man, this is a lot of work. I need to hire somebody. So she hired somebody, and that person did all the work, and she collected all the money. And then a few years later, she sold the business for like a 3 or 4 times multiple of whatever the net revenue was. And so I'm like, you know what, I like that idea a lot better than the other idea where we lost money. And so, and then there's been an Amazon business and some other things. But I say that only to say that she supports all of the craziness that is my ideas. And I have way more ideas. And this is going to come to the first part of the discussion. And I kind of have the adult version of, and this isn't an actual diagnosis, so please, if you have this or struggle with it or know somebody, I kind of have adult ADD, like I cannot sit still for very long. So if you don't mind, I'm going to come to the board some, but I want to ask some questions. Can this be interactive? Is that okay?
Absolutely, yes.
So first of all, what's the difference between an entrepreneur, and I'm not going to spell out the whole thing, versus a business person? Is there a difference between entrepreneur and business person?
Yes, an entrepreneur wants to start businesses over and over. A business person is centered on one idea. That's what I learned.
Actually, you're pretty darn close. There's no wrong answers. There's just not right answers. No, I'm just teasing. So entrepreneur has to do with ideas. What does a business person have to do with? This is important. Has nothing to do with product. Okay? Has to do with administration, admin stuff. If you are a fantastic idea person, but you're terrible as a business person, you will be the brokest great idea person that the world has ever met. Revenue, revenue, revenue. My daughter teases me because if we come up with a business idea, we're going to do something, and I'll look at my wife or I'll look at my staff, I'm like, yeah, but how does that generate revenue? So now anytime we talk about something, she's like, Dad, what about the revenue? And she's right. If you don't have revenue, it doesn't matter what your ideas are. Now, we understand that all businesses start in a certain place and you're having to funnel money into them. But if you convince yourself that you have to perpetually shove money into something, that at some point some magical, mystical person, a billionaire from New York, is going to save you in your own stupidity, I'm not trying to be critical, but you will fail. And then you'll get frustrated. And then what happens is you get great people that are all the entrepreneurial ideas in the world that end up working at the Piggly Wiggly or whatever. Is that a southern thing, the Piggly Wiggly? It's like a grocery mart down south.
Yeah, it is.
So I want to make sure you understand that there has to be this combination of great ideas, but you do have to have some business sense or hire somebody with business sense to make sure that the idea is implemented. Otherwise, you will fail. And so my hope is, and I think it is based on everything that I've seen, that the Innovation Center is not just ideas and not just patents, because I know people that have literally 50, 100 patents and are broke. And so patents alone won't get you to where you want to get to. Does that make sense? Now, I got a little ahead of myself because I got excited about this idea of entrepreneur versus business person, because I met a bunch of entrepreneurial/business people in the dinner that we had before this, and it got me jazzed, got me excited. You know, I love hearing good ideas, but let's be careful on the business portion of it. So by way of introduction, I'm too old to be young and too young to be old. I have 2 kids that are in college at SUU. My son plays football. He's a wide receiver there. My youngest is a sophomore at, what's his name of the Cedar Hills? Cedar High School. We just moved here from Louisiana. We'd been in Louisiana for 20 years, and then we came here. We had some Airbnbs here, and then we decided kind of by compulsion that we should be here. And we're fortunate enough that my businesses allow it. My wife is an ER nurse in addition to her side hustle kind of stuff, and we're loving it. We love the weather right now. It's fantastic. So now that we have the groundwork on the entrepreneur versus admin, is there an eraser? I can use my hand, but I prefer not. That's all right. I'll choose my hand. So what are there could be a number of things, but in your opinion, what are the 3 things that you need to see the most success? We'll call them something creative, like the three C's of success. See how I did that there? That was pretty good. What do you think the 3 C's of success may be? Everybody's like, A, B, C. All right, I'll just give it to you. Number 1 is courses. You have to have an understanding of what it is that you're doing. Now, what I mean by that, now I'm going to take some of your ideas if that's okay, because you're making them, and if you want to maybe try to take them someplace. So if you're doing some sort of auditory experience with books, for example, then what are the courses or things that you need to be reading or learning or doing to become a master in that particular field? So the idea is that you're perpetually doing courses or learning something to master what it is that you're doing. Now here's the truth. Money follows mastery. Hey, thank you. I'll lick my hand off later. Money follows mastery. So it doesn't precede it. If you want to make money, which is not a bad idea, not a bad thing. Yes, we do things for passion and for love, and we get ideas, but ultimately we do want to actually generate so that we can then do other things that we enjoy, whether it's charity or whether it's giving back to the community or whether it's devoting time to other things, whatever the case might be. But you have to have mastery before you ever see money. Let me give you a small example. I love both of the professions I'm going to tell you for different reasons, but there is a difference. A surgeon and a janitor. The reason that a surgeon makes so much more than a janitor is quite simply because they have a mastery of a specific niche or a specific need. Everything that you need to be a janitor, you pretty much, everybody in here, even our youngest guys, have learned at a young age what it takes to clean. Now, some of you parents, might need to do a better job with it. I know we could, but the idea is, so the skill set is kind of rampant, right? Everybody has the skill set. So what I'm trying, as opposed to a surgeon who goes through, graduates, gets their bachelor's, and then they go on and get an advanced degree, and then they have to get their doctorate, then they have years of residency, right? So they have all this time so that they become a master. When it comes time to pay somebody, a hospital goes to a surgeon and they say, man, we're going to pay you lots of money. Meanwhile, headhunters are coming after that same surgeon. Why? Because there's been the funnel to the mastery of whatever that surgeon is accomplishing. So a surgeon could literally go to their employer and be like, hey, you're not paying me enough and I need more vacation time. And if they're like, well, sorry, they'll just go to someplace else that will pay them better and give them more of what they want. Whereas if a janitor came to the staff and said, hey, you know what, I'm underappreciated, undervalued for all the hard work I do, and they work really, really hard, you need to pay me 3 times more. What is the staff going to, what's the employer going to do? Sorry, we can hire a number of people that can perform that job. So I say that to say that whatever it is that you're pursuing, and I don't care if you work someplace very specific, if you own something, you have to become a master in that field because it creates a niche, which then creates an opportunity to make more money. Does that make sense? All right, the second thing is you've got to have coaching. And I'll just write the third so I don't forget here. And then the third thing is community. Coaching is so important. You have to be willing to pay for mentorship. And typically, if it's a good coach, they're going to charge you because their time is worth something. And you have to be willing to pay the cost. Community, you have some community here. Have y'all heard that thing that you're kind of the average of the 5 people that you spend your most time with? In the business world, that is 1,000% true. Now you can actually have different pods of 5. You can actually have a social pod, and that's going to kind of determine how you are in social settings. But you definitely are going to have a business pod. If you're asking people that are unsuccessful or getting their opinion on a product idea or how to run a business, and they're not doing that great, you're talking to the wrong people. And if you ever notice, the people that are the most successful communicate and collaborate with people that are most successful, right? So as an example, and I'm going to write down community, we talked about coaching. Let me give a small example. So I just started doing freelance marketing online. Affiliate marketing is another word for it, where I drive traffic someplace on products that aren't mine, and then I convert them through wonderful ad script and just fantastic little buttons you push. And then if people click on it, I get paid a commission. And so if I was going to do that and talk to, and I love him because he is my brother, not like a brother, but if I talked to my brother who works for the post office and I said, hey man, I'm doing this, and he said, that is the stupidest idea I've heard. You can't make money online doing that. And then I listen to that voice and I say, man, maybe he's right, maybe I can't do it. And so I walk away from that opportunity. I'm not listening to the correct source for where I'm wanting to get to. So if I own a sandwich shop, or I have the idea of opening up a sandwich shop, and I'm talking to people that tried a sandwich shop and failed, they're going to tell me about all the negative things that are wrong with the sandwich shop, as opposed to people that are prospering in it and that have an attitude of abundance. Then they're going to tell me all the opportunity that exists within a sandwich shop. Does that make sense? So make sure that you're going to the right source with the right questions, and then you'll listen to what they have to say. Because if they give you heeds or warnings, and in your mind you're like, yeah, what do you know? Well, no, actually they do know. They're way more successful than I am, right? They're making 10 times, 20 times, 100 times what I'm making. That's going to make a difference. So make sure that we understand that particular principle. Now, I did want to write down so we can maybe talk a little bit in specificity about things that are interesting to you and maybe weave some of the principles in there. So I've had a different, I think I'm getting reverb. Oh, I'm going to stand behind it. My path has been an interesting one. So whenever people ask me what I do for a living, I don't know exactly how to answer. Because I believe, regardless of what great idea we have, what business we're doing, how successful it is, that this principle of fingers of income is really important, especially because you don't ever know. One regulatory action can shut down an entire economy sector, or one lawsuit can destroy a business. We've seen that happen. And so the idea is that if it looks like I have a number of things, that's because I do, because I believe in this principle of fingers of income. Now, when I do my thinking now, and it may be different depending on where you're at, I don't think in multiples of hundreds, I obviously think in multiples of thousands. So if it won't create some number of thousands based on whatever incremental time I'm going to put into it, then I don't want to pursue that. The other thing that I don't do is, if it's not something that I can build up and then have somebody run for me, or have the entity passively create the income within a couple of years, then I'm not interested. Because I value my time, and I like to go on bike rides in Cedar City, and I like to be at all my kids' stuff and all that kind of stuff. So I'll tell you some of the things we've done, and then maybe we can talk about some of those things that might interest you, or not talk about any of them. So for the first, I still do this. I'm a financial advisor. Now that's a really kind of loose term, because quite frankly, you can classify yourself as a financial advisor if you sell term insurance, which is kind of short-term stuff, or you're a financial advisor if you do investment techniques that are super risky and super crazy. So like, this is a broad term. So I'll tell you, my financial advising, I work with high net worth individuals that have either inherited money or build a bunch of money in businesses. And then I invest it. People that take risk in business typically don't like taking risk in their investments, because they've worked so hard and they know they can make 15, 20, 30% on their money. And so once they've made it and kind of accumulate, they're like very conservative stuff, which resonates really with me. So I do a lot of guaranteed kind of cash flow analysis and all that kind of stuff. And so use some different products to kind of help with that. So I've been doing this for over 20 years. I still do it, but I only do probably 4 to 6 cases a year, but they're bigger cases. And then the other thing is, we did own a construction brick and block, literally brick and block. Not when I say, people are like, oh, a brick and block building. No, it was actually like bricks, brick and block stuff for hospitals, for schools, for that kind of thing. I run an athletic training center. Actually, I don't run it. I have staff that run it, but we own athletic training center. And it's a 12,000 square foot facility where we do general population training. It's actually where we make most of our money. We're adult classes. It's based on principles of athleticism, but we also train youth. And then we do combine training, like high level, collegiate guys that are wanting to go to the pros and stuff like that. So that's one of the places. This is in Louisiana. This was in Louisiana. Also do day trading. Now, you're like, well, what does that have to do with business? Well, we can talk about that a little bit, but this is day trade stuff. So I typically spend about a half hour in the morning and then a half hour in the evening. And when I'm doing it and doing it actively, it equals to or surpasses the cumulative of all those other things. So it's kind of an interesting thing. And then do freelance marketing. This is online. You'll notice that as I go down this list, I'm going more and more away from people as opposed to interfacing with people and problems and stuff like that. I don't know what that means exactly. I just thought it was interesting. Well, actually, I do know what it means. I love people, but I'd rather love them in a non-business sense. This is all online. And then we've done property. Now, the reason I say property is because we've done commercial, we've done like low income stuff, we've done Airbnb. That pretty good. Did I get everything? Is that about right, sweetheart? Some of the stuff we've sold out of. Yeah, that pretty much covers it. Really, it was family land that we pretended like was lumber so that we could have tax write-off. That's really what that ended up being at the end of the day. So maybe what I'll do is to have some track on it. Is there any one of those things, because I have notes of the direction I can go and kind of go through them and then see if there's some lessons we can all jointly learn together. But I'm wondering if any of those things seems more appropriate for this group setting than another. Please.
I mean, I don't know if I represent the crowd here, but
You represent yourself though, so that's good.
I hope so. Freelance marketing, the affiliate marketing, that's very interesting. It's something that so many people do and fail at as well.
Yeah.
It's interesting to know what successes you have there and why you believe you have successes.
So this is in its infancy, but I can talk to you a little bit about it. First of all, there is a principle that I think is important for work. Actually, I think it's important for life. I've used it a number of places. But it's the principle of POP, which is patterns of productivity. So the patterns that you do on a daily basis to create success. So freelance marketing is an interesting beast because what ends up happening is a bunch of newbies get into the market. They go to the wrong source of information, so they get half information. They don't want to go to like a full weekend webinar, which is the course that I took. They don't want to pay for the actual tutor to do it because it's expensive. It's like 15 grand, and they don't want to actually put the time in. Just as an aside, algorithms for Facebook, for example, if you see all the ads on Facebook, great place to market, great place to advertise if you're really target and specific, understand people's interests. But what happens is people will put a marketing budget at it, and then if they don't feel like it's working, they'll stop. And then a little later, they'll put some more money at it and they'll stop. So the way that all of those algorithms work is that when you start the campaign, the first thing you're doing is mining for data. Yes, you're getting leads, but you're trying to see what's working, what's selling, and that accumulates over a period of time. But if you stop the campaign, you go back to the bottom, and you have to start all over building the algorithm again. So you're way better off having a non-functioning or a terrible ad that people aren't clicking on to drive that traffic than you are stopping it and then restarting it. So what happens most often is people will have an ad budget. Let's just pick a number. This would be a very low ad budget, but you can do it like this for sure. If somebody had an ad budget of $150, this actually works great for business too, just so you know. Any business. I don't care if you're a shop in town or if you, whatever. Marketing and advertising. I don't know if I mentioned that. I went to BYU, graduated in marketing and advertising, and truth of the matter is you use that for every business, whatever it is. You're selling something, right? Selling your time, your services, whatever. But if I have a $150 a month marketing budget and I make 0 sales in the first month, most people are like, oh man, that's terrible. The next month I do it again. Why? Because I'm mining for data. I'm getting a search history. The algorithm also fine tunes so that it gets more of the people that you put in a little Facebook thing where it says, I want men and women 30 to 60 years old that are roughly this income, this, that. It takes them time to mine for that information mining. So sometimes they don't necessarily know, but then some person puts in their information on some site and then Facebook gets it so that then they then become part of the target marketing. I'm not trying to nerd out, but that's just to give you an idea. Let's say the second month you pay and you get 0 sales. The third month you pay again and you actually get a sale. And in this particular case, we're just going to pretend like a sale is worth $100. So in that third month I made $100, but it cost me $450. I'm down $350. What do? What do most people do? Oh, I made it. I'm going to keep my same advertising budget. I'm going to pull that money back out. That's a terrible idea in the infancy of a business. So the next month I take that and I invest $250 into it, and I get 2 sales. That's another $200. So you start to run the math out. Let's see, we were down $350 before. We paid another $250. That puts us to $600, but now I got a sale. Now I'm only down $400. But those 2 sales, I generate $200. The next month, I do $450, and then I also have all this data mine that's gone beyond, and so you might get 4 this month, so you're 400. Now at some point here, you actually end up getting way ahead. So you might end up saying, okay, now I'm investing $850 in marketing, and in this particular month, I actually did 12 sales. Now I've made $1,200. Now you might find in here that you're like, I feel good about spending $1,000 a month on ads based on what I'm getting. So you're spending $1,000 a month, and you're getting 15 sales a month, so you're getting $1,500, but then from there forward, you might just keep carrying forward the $1,000 a month because you've kind of hit a sweet spot. So then you're making $500, but what ends up happening is because of this cumulative effect of the algorithms that are there, that are happening, you actually, instead of that same $1,000 only yielding the same 15 sales, all of a sudden that becomes 20 sales. 20 sales becomes 25 sales. Now, you will get to a certain point where you're like, oh, this is great. You will want to increase that ad budget, because if you can take $1 and make $3, how many times are you going to spend $1? As often as possible is the correct answer. So the idea is you might start off, man, investment, but you get to a point with any business that if you pour enough marketing in to get the flow of traffic, right? So if I have a brick and mortar place, I want people, I want leads to come in to try my product or to try my service. And then when they do, hopefully they're going to tell their friends, but I've got to keep funneling marketing dollars in there, right? That's why marketing and advertising never goes away. And it's the same thing online. You got to funnel as much as you can to get in front of as many eyes as possible because it's a numbers game. Your conversion rate, depending on what the product is, might be 1% or 4% or 5%, depending what it is. So that's kind of how the advertising works. You've got to be willing to put it in there long enough. Like when I say long enough, you should account for at least a year, saying I know I can spend at least this marketing budget for a year, even if I don't make a single sale. You're going to make sales. That's not possible, but I want somebody to think like that. And if you can't afford to do it every single month, then you can't afford to be in the business of online marketing. But if you pick a number and you do it, and then you commit that when I make a sale, that money goes right back into it, then all of a sudden it's getting in front of more eyes, then I'm getting more sales. What ends up happening is by about month 6 or 7, instead of being upside down, you're right side up. And then if you need to or want to, you can start taking a little bit of skin, but you keep advertising at that same level. Does that make sense? Yeah. For some of you people, you're like, wait, what's the internet? No, I'm just teasing. That's the kind of idea. Any other questions that you specifically think of?
I've got one.
Please.
So this is something that I've kind of tried to wrap my mind around, and it's the same concept that you just talked about now. So it seems like we're always taught growing up that, I hope I'm explaining this the right way. We work for wages, not for profits. You just said, hey, there's profits in here, right? You put your money in here, and then you get a return. And eventually it will get to where you want it to be. The hard part is getting into the regular working world. When you get your wages, what do? You take that money, put it into your bank account, and then you pay your bills with it, right? So how do you get out of that mindset of just working for wages? In other words, 40 hours a week is what my paycheck generates. And you start taking that money and then you make it work for you for profits, not wages.
Yeah, that's a great question. So quite bluntly, not everybody should. Not everybody should exchange consistent wages for this idea of chasing profits. By design, we're all different and created differently. So as an example, I have one of my brothers that needs structure, needs somebody to tell him what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. And he makes a fantastic employee. Like I said, he works for the Postal Service and has been there for 25 years or something. He tried to do something that was entrepreneurial in spirit, and it ended up being that he would sit at his computer and play games. So you have to have, if you're going to be an actual business owner or an actual entrepreneur, you have to, when you work for no one, you work for everyone, right? Every person that's a client then becomes your pseudo boss, so to speak. You know, I've got some things that are on quote autopilot, but guess what? I'm flying out next week to spend a week at the training facility because we lost the head coach and 3 of the other people in a week and a half period. So like you have to be able to be okay with the risk that's associated with not doing it, and not everybody is cut from that cloth. The key is if you find that you're not that person, that it gives you too much angst or you don't get excited by it or you can't get it, be satiated with where you're at, right? You have to have a level of happiness in your life, and money is significantly overrated to bring happiness. Some of the most unhappy people I know are friends of mine that are the most wealthy. Having said that, poverty is not that great of a character builder. So don't get it confused. Making money is not the worst thing in the world. So the idea is that you're making money, but you enjoy it, you love it, you're passionate about it. And I never have and never will apologize for making really fantastic money on a lot of my stuff. But there's also been times and seasons in our married life that we had nothing. And I'm like, hey girl, we're gonna plug this thing out because I have confidence in myself. I have an attitude of abundance that we're gonna make this work. And then you get the coaching, you get the mentors, right? You get the community, and then you start to drive and you start to work to see it on that end. But not everybody is cut from that cloth. Please.
I was going to say, one of the discussions that we've had with a lot of friends in our marriage is, okay, so if this fails, what's the worst case scenario? And you have to be okay with the worst case scenario. Like, let's say this athletic training facility that we're on the line for
A few million bucks, yeah.
So what happens if that goes under? And then you figure out what the worst case scenario is. You go bankrupt, and then we go get jobs at McDonald's or Walmart.
Which, by the way, I would never do that. We would just start another business.
No, right, but the point is
Oh,
that
yeah.
that's what you do. You sell your house,
Yeah.
and are we okay with that? And if you're okay with that, then go for it. If you're not okay with that, don't risk that being the worst case scenario.
Because we've lost money, to my wife's point, which, by the way, she actually is my wife. She's not my daughter, so don't make that joke. Too many people, they're like, oh man, they're like, oh, these your daughters? I'm like, seriously, I don't look that old. But to her point, like we've lost a lot of money on a lot of different things, and then just be like, meh, like, oh yeah, that stinks. I would love to have that in my bank account, but you can't dwell. Like if you're the type of personality that dwells on this idea that if I lose the money, I'm gonna, look, we all started with nothing. Like we literally, when we were married, our son was a welfare baby, and we went to, I don't even remember what the store was. It was at Provo someplace. And we were on WIC, that's the government subsidized stuff. That first year, I think we made $9,500 total between both of us. Now we were going to school and stuff. We were so poor, and we had planned it out so meticulously, our budget. She was pregnant and had cotton mouth. And she's like, hey, sweetheart, can we get a pack of gum? At the time, I think it was 39 or 49 cents or something ridiculous. I'm like, honestly, no, we can't. I don't have the money. Now, if you ever want to feel like a schmuck of a husband, have your wife ask for gum while she's holding your child, and then you're like, no, I can't afford 49 cents with tax 51 cents or whatever it would have been. That's how poor we were. Now, we've had times of really fantastic prosperity, and you can book it that we appreciate it a lot more because we're like, hey, remember that time when I couldn't buy you gum? I'll buy you whole boxes now, baby. So I come home from Sam's Club, I'm like throwing gum all up in the air, you know. But my point is, you have to understand that when you have more responsibilities, you get more nervous, right? Some of you have some responsibilities, some of you have more responsibilities. So you buy all this stuff, so you get nervous. So what if we lose it? What if? Like at the end of the day, oh my gosh, we're not going to have our boat anymore. Okay, well great, you don't have a boat, you don't have your little razor, you don't have your mountain bike. You know, if everything came, and this is, in my opinion, the difference between just a business owner and an entrepreneur, which is why there is a melding of that, and you can be one or the other, and that's totally fine. If you're an entrepreneur, get yourself somebody that's a business person. If you're a business person, you better have an entrepreneur, because otherwise you're just going to be managing nothing. But if you can learn to kind of meld those things, so what happens is you're like, okay, if we got it all taken away today, if you got everything you have, whatever that might be, whether it's small or big, if it's all gone tomorrow, do you have the internal fortitude to rebuild and redo it and figure it out? If the answer is not yes, then quite honestly, we're we're like on different wavelengths for this whole discussion, because that's the mindset that you've got to have when you're trying to become a master of something. Sometimes mastery happens over the course of a few months if you're like significantly focused, but sometimes it may take several years. And in that process, you will fail, and you've got to be okay with it. Day trading, I think I'm down. I have these what I call buckets. Is anybody familiar with investing? It's where you invest in something and it does horrible. So when I first started, instead of doing what I should have done, which was put the time, energy, and effort into coming into methodologies and processes and only following patterns and doing all those things that I do now, I did this thing where I'm like, man, the market looks pretty good. I'd throw some money at something that like go totally up. I'm like, I'm an investment genius, and so I would take the money out. And then I'd do it again, and then when it would drop, I'm like, well, certainly it's going to come back. And then it continue to downfall until all of a sudden 95, 99, and then it like literally all gone, which can happen in penny stock land, which is where I like to hang out. And so, I just looked at it just because I was curious, thinking through failures. We have over 40,000 of buckets that I keep in there, and I'm not going to sell, even though I could probably use them as a tax write-off. But they're fantastic reminders of how absolutely crappy I felt because I was, not smart with what I was doing and how I was doing it. I didn't have the mastery, therefore I lost the money, right? So that's the same thing with any business. If you try to get out a little bit ahead of your skis without the proper mastery and methodology, then you'll lose money. You'll lose a lot of it. But you got to be okay with the worst case scenario, but then be smart about how you approach it.
So kind of explain to us, is it for, are you doing this for the money? Are you doing it for the success? What's
Yes.
all this for? What's the driving factor?
Both those things. I love building something from scratch, and I love the process of making money, not because I love money, but I love what money can do for my family, for my community, for other people. To be quite frank, we're not anywhere near where we're going to be, but we don't have to worry about buying gum. But we can help our family, help buy my sister a car, help my parents. We just went in on a house with my parents that they're like, oh, we can't really afford it. I guess we're just gonna stay renting the rest of our lives, which is they're totally broken up about. We were able to come in and say, well, look, what if we, paid $1,500 a month and we went partners on the deal, and they're like, oh, okay, well that works out pretty good. So being able to help your family, make sure your kids are taken care of, charitable pursuits are kind of an important thing to us and that kind of thing. And so I think that there actually is, and in certain circles I understand I would be castigated for saying this, but the more money you make, the more opportunity you have to help people and create joy, create memories, create those kind of things. And so that's not to say if I didn't make money, we'd be unhappy, because we've done that and we've been super happy. Making curtains for our own house out of whatever that fabric was, kind of the funky looking burlap. Oh yeah, it was burlap. Y'all ever make curtains out of burlap? It was rustic, we like to say. Yeah. But my point is that because we've experienced poverty and because we've experienced wealth, that dream, that American dream that people talk about, where you can actually do things, the reason it's so exciting and so fun is not because you can buy a bunch of junk. It's because you can have experiences and not be worried about where the bills are coming from, or have the stress associated with whatever it is that you're doing. And so the honest answer is, I want to make money, and I want to make a lot of it, because I can have more impact. My sphere of influence increases the more money that I end up making. But I also love employing people. This one we had like 300 people in the athletic training center. At some point we had like 10. We lost a bunch of them recently, so we're about cut in half right now. That's what I'm going to go and try to help with this next week. But I like seeing people getting paid for their good work and incentivizing them. All of my companies have incentive structures that are heavily based on what they put into it. And so it's fun to see their success, but I like seeing something built from scratch and then becoming successful. So y'all have different product ideas and things you've done. I've never done a product, but I had a raw piece of land that I turned into a 12,000 square foot facility that does around 100,000 a month in revenue. Well, that's fun. And it's going to be more fun when we do 200,000 a month in revenue. Why? Because it's twice the amount, so it's twice the fun. So that's kind of long version of the answer.
Oh, it's great. Thanks. Any other questions?
Easy. That's easy.
No,
All right.
no,
So let me ask
no.
you this: is 7 o'clock our stop
Yep,
time?
you keep going, yep.
All right. So actually, let me refer to my notes because there's some things that I want to make sure that we covered. Oh, Isaac had mentioned something about reducing failure rate. Right? Didn't you kind of talk about that?
That's part of what our goal is the entrepreneurs and the startups. We want to take down the failure rate of startups.
So let me ask you all this question. When is an appropriate time to have some drive, some stick-to-itiveness, and when is an appropriate time to realize that your idea is actually not that good? Because that happens, right? Y'all know people, or you're like, no, I am that person, that you've held on to an idea for so long that you've like got smothered into oblivion financially, but you're like, man, it's still a great idea. No, if the market doesn't want it, it's not that great of an idea. I'm not trying to hurt your feelings. But if it was that good of an idea, it would work after some period of time. So let me ask you guys, what is that time? When is it time to have some stick-to-itiveness, and when is it time to close shop? You're like, you're the presenter. Why are you asking us a question?
No, I think we should let them answer because there should be an answer. When do you stop?
I would probably say, like, I would at least give it a year. Like, I would push through, like you said earlier, you know, like with the freelance marketing, like, you have to give it some time
Yeah.
to see if it works. And after that, maybe reevaluate and see why it's not working, or, I don't know. That's my answer.
No, I think that's great insight. Anybody else? Does anybody own a brick and mortar something in this room? Like a brick and mortar store, like a food place or a shop place or anything like that? She's poking you. Oh yeah. Okay. How long did you go straight to that, or you did something before that?
We just did it out on the street.
Nice. Proof of concept.
Yeah, we were just seeing if it would work.
And apparently did.
Taking overhead, literally.
Yeah.
So not a real risk,
Nice.
and we didn't have any money. So
That's a smart way to do it. Instead of taking on a brick and mortar place, first do a proof of concept of sorts and then kind of move into that. Good. I will tell you this, and the reason I said that is because a lot of times people hold on to an idea for too long. So it is industry specific. So I told them they had to be okay with this idea of funding the marketing budget for the online stuff for a year. And there's some time that somebody has to make the decision to buy. And then like if it's a high ticket item, which is typically what I try to market for because it's bigger commissions, it's a longer sales process, right? So it's like a 45-day sale process, and then they have like 30 days they can get their money back. So it's like a couple of months before you even potentially see something. And then you have to build the leads, you have to build the data. And so that cycle may be like, okay, if I'm not seeing something by like 4 or 5 months, like some proof of life, then I got a problem, right? But there's certain things, most of the time, if you don't have some traction on what you're doing within those first few months, you really have to take a sharp look in the mirror. So, I mean, there's so many examples of this. Y'all have seen this. Like, let's say, for example, that somebody said, I want to put an ice cream shop in Cedar City. And they did all the stuff, they invested all the money, and they did a grand opening. And their first month, they made $300. Well, by the second month, if they're putting enough marketing energy behind it and word of mouth and the few people that they service, and they're talking to schools and they're talking to everybody, doing whatever, if by that second or third month, there's not some pretty good traction, they should be nervous. They should definitely be nervous. And so it kind of depends on the business in terms of what you're going to do. And so I did that kind of as a trick question because there is no one answer. It depends on the business. So make sure that you get with smart people in the field and ask them. So for example, if he started a business on some carts and you had a pretty good word of mouth and it was getting out there and there's not a lot of overhead, and so it's like, man, we could expand this pretty easily because we're already making profit kind of out the gate. Well, you got a good concept, right? And then it's just a matter of how much you would like, or if you even choose to scale it or not. So that was a good example.
Is that time frame going to be different for brick and mortar versus e-com?
Absolutely, yeah. Mm-hmm. Software stuff too. Software takes more time. There was somebody who was sophomore. Did he leave? Sophomore. Software.
He's gone.
Yeah. So like the guy who's doing software, that's going to be more time because you have to break into something or prove that the innovative success of it is, worthwhile and that kind of thing.
App.
Your stuff is going to potentially take a little more time because people are like, I don't even know what this is. They have to experience it. You have to get word of mouth. You have to market it appropriately. You have to do, and so your runway is going to be a little different than maybe somebody else's. But if you're not seeing some pretty darn good traction, especially if you like actually roll it out, and you're not doing, if the marketing isn't getting it to where it needs to be over a course of a year, you got to take a real look at like, okay, either got to bring somebody in, I need to invest more dollars, or I need to fold the idea. You don't want to waste too much time on it, but you're definitely not going to be like in a month or two.
What would the time frame for him be? So just so everybody knows, Brandon is creating an app, and he's doing a really good job. The app is days away from being approved, but what kind of time frame should he stick to with that? Because it could go forever, right? Do you give free app downloads to everybody forever, or when's that point that he needs to transition?
So it all depends on, you gotta either have or find somebody that can give enough investment to see if there's proof of concept out there. So if you have a large ad spend or marketing spend, for example, well then that might go on for a few months. But if it's like the trickle kind of marketing thing, word of mouth, organic stuff, then it could be 6 months or a year, or whatever the case might be. So, and then it's just like anything else. You got to build the hype appropriately to deliver on it, because if it lingers for too long, it then just becomes a really cool idea that never got legs. And so you got to find somebody or some bodies that can really help you with that marketing portion of it. Honestly, marketing is equally or more important than the product. Let me give you an example. Is anybody familiar with crumble cookies? Okay, does everybody in here like crumble cookies? Okay, I hate them. And if you own a crumble cookie, I have a good friend of mine that owns a crumble franchise, and I tell him the same thing. They're over sugary, they're like this thick, I can eat like a quarter of them and I feel like I'm gonna puke, But their marketing is fantastic. A new flavor every week, and I'm like, I don't care, but everybody else does. Like my daughter literally follows their thing. Yeah. Yeah, see? Like my daughter, who's gonna be coming to SU, she does that same thing. She's like, oh my gosh, Dad, they have peanut butter and whatever this week. I'm like, baby, I don't like their cookies. I don't want, but they figured out the marketing portion of it. I happen to know they spend a tremendous amount on marketing, like a lot. Their digital presence, all that kind of stuff. And at the end of the day, we're all just buying overpriced cookies. So if you want an example of how important marketing and advertising is and getting the right thing, so like on any of the products that y'all have, you've got to have, I would spend equal to or more time on the marketing and rollout as I would on the actual product. That's how important it is. I've seen mediocre products skyrocket and do fantastic. Y'all, what were those little band things called? Silly bands? Y'all remember silly bands? Mm-hmm. Okay, guys, that guy went to China and saw these little bands, and he's like, I bet I can market this, that a bunch of silly Americans will buy this to pieces. So they did. Like, you literally just bought bags of essentially cheap rubber bands. And it was this huge craze. So they did an interview with this guy. He owned a restaurant, and he was running the business out of the top of his restaurant. And they're like, well, yeah, sure. They're like, well, how much sales are you doing? He's like, I'm doing 10 million of profit a month. And they're like, oh my goodness, well, how long can that possibly last? He said, I don't know, I'm doing 10 million of profit a month. He went to China, found a cheap little silly band thing. He marketed like crazy, and he did it surrounding some, key buying kind of holidays and stuff. All of a sudden, silly bands are in every marketplace, every convenience store, everything. People are like trading silly bands and doing this thing, and it was a craze. Well, guess what? I don't know how y'all's numbers are, but let's say he did, and at this point he'd been doing that. So like, well, how long have you been doing that? He'd been doing it for like 18 months at that point. And they're like, well, what if this trend goes away? He's like, let me reemphasize, I'm doing 10 million profit a month after expenses. So his point was sometimes you have to ride those waves, but it was only because of fantastic marketing. And silly bands people knew, but they kept making these knockoffs. People were like, well, if he can do that, I can do this. Well, what happened? It flopped. They didn't do as well. They didn't have the marketing, they didn't have the launch, they didn't have the momentum. But anyway, that's a whole nother discussion. Any other specific questions? One of the things I would point out that I put a note on, I thought this was super fast. Nothing gets you from where you are to where you would like to be faster than learning a new skill. So in our businesses or in our proposed businesses, Literally nothing gets you from point A to point B, whatever that is in your mind, however you're going to define success, faster than learning a new skill. So you need to be perpetual learners of those kind of material. Remember when I talk about courses? Now, I don't always necessarily specifically mean you have to be taking courses, but you need to be reading, you need to be researching, you need to be understanding the nuances of other people's businesses, what works for them, and what they've done that has not worked for them. And you need to surround yourself with the right people. And again, let me emphasize, you have to surround yourself with people that value their time, so it may actually cost you something to be a part of it. Like if I'm going to go into a master class for any of these things, they're not going to give me the information for free because they know that their time is more valuable than that. So what happens a lot of times is business people, actually entrepreneurs even more so, will say, well, I don't want to do that because it's going to cost me money. You have to think of it a little bit different and think, what is the opportunity cost of not participating with the right people in the right space, with the right mindset? Like I talked about earlier, that abundance mindset. If you're talking to the right people, then whatever you pay for their time or for their course or for their whatever, it'll be X 10, 15, 20, 50 times over, whatever the case might be. But if you look for what you feel like is a shortcut, or I'm just going to do this on my own, the path less traveled is less traveled in business for a reason. It's because it doesn't work. So find people that have had success in that particular field and actually follow that path. And then you mimic, or you do exactly what they tell you to do, or do it exactly the way that they've done it, and then, by no surprise, you end up having success. And so that was one of the points I wanted to make sure I brought up. All right, it's now 6:55. Any other specific questions that you can think of that might be helpful in whatever you're doing in your life or whatever you'd like to do in your life? All right, I'm going to tell you a funny story then. This is for fun. I'm going to do all these things. Athletic training I got into just because I was passionate about fitness and I liked it, and it ended up being a great thing. Kind of a passion project. So day trading, most of the time I hold a day trade for like 35, 45 seconds, and I'm just momentum trading. But there's specific patterns that you have to follow. It's not just throwing it in there and hoping. But when I first got into trading, there was my general manager of my athletic training facility, and I would sit there, and instead of doing actual productive work, we'd be like, oh, what are you going to invest in today? What are we going to invest in? And we'd kind of talk about it and all that kind of stuff. And we started to learn that if it had a lot of volume, there was potential there. This is a story of missed opportunity, but the redemption is that you can figure out from those things to then create opportunity later. So there was a ticker, it was called TSNP. Yes, I remember the number, because the night I came home, there was 5 minutes left in the market, I threw $10,000 at it. And I actually meant to put 1,000, but I put in another zero, and then I looked at it, I'm like, you know what, let's send it. So I did the order. I don't even know if I told you I had done it, because this was kind of in the infancy of it, right? So you have to have over 25,000 in an account to actually do day trading, otherwise you have to do swing trading. And so I was kind of being a little bit cautious and conservative. So I put this money in. The next morning, they announced that they were having a merger, and then they also announced some other stuff. This thing skyrocketed. I mean, like, it was so crazy. The market opened, and within 3 minutes, I was up 70%. I'm like, this is incredible. So I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have the mastery, and so I didn't deserve the money, but I ended up selling out of my entire position, even though it was all the volume in the world, all the key indicators. Had I known what I was doing, I would have and should have held on to it. I sold out, I made $7,000, which you think, oh, that's pretty good, right? I mean, $7,000 in 3 or 4 minutes. I don't know in your world, in my world, that's still real money. And so then I bought back into it later on, and I made another $4,000 or $5,000. And I'm like, this is awesome. But then I was out. I'm like, you know what? I've made over 100% on my money. I'm just going to kind of watch, see what this does, because inevitably it's going to come down. So over the next period of days, this goofy thing, literally, I owned, and I still remember to this day the exact number of shares. I owned 2,666,666 shares, exactly. So for all the mathematicians in the room, actually we'll put it up here. So that's how many shares I bought with $10,000. Over the course of 1 month, it went from the .0 whatever I ended up paying for it, it went over $4 in 1 month. So for any of the mathematicians in the room, if you times 2.6 million by 4, you have lots of millions. And that's dollars, not pesos, right? That's real dollars. So the takeaway is, to get lucky, sometimes that happens in life and you kind of feel good about it. But to become a master of what you're doing is significantly more important. There has not been before or since anything like this TSNP ticker that actually became Humble, HMBL, that now is worth like, I say only, I don't remember, it's like 80 or 90 cents or something like that. Like it went all the way up and then it came down. It actually peaked up here like $6, $7 and it's tumbled down ever since. But my point is this, in kind of conclusion, is to say, if you want to really garner what you're worth, you have to know what you're doing. Had I known what I was doing, instead of randomly putting money at it and thinking it was awesome because I made 100%, I could have turned 10,000 into, rough math, 10 million. So what was the takeaway lesson to me? Now, was I upset about it? Okay, yes, I was a little bit. Was I more irritated by it? Also, yes. But I learned a valuable lesson in that in order for me to have earned the right to get these kind of returns on this kind of thing, I had to master the material. So from that time forward, and I say this principle for any of those businesses that I've done and any that I will do, I've learned that you cannot luck yourself into success. You have to learn yourself and become the master of your success in order to truly own it. And sometimes it's hard and sometimes it's difficult and whatever the case might be. But that's my story of what could have been. And again, I've enjoyed making the money and I've made a lot of money since and all that kind of stuff, and I've lost some money along the way. But the real takeaway is that you will have to earn success. It's never given. You have to become a master of what it is that you're working on, fine-tuning, designing, whatever the case might be. But understand that that's one layer of something that you've learned. And if you want to take it from here to here, you have to continue to learn the next skill that's going to help you to continue to propel. So I wish you guys all the luck, and I look forward to seeing some of your faces in the, I don't know, the Forbes 500 or the whatever successful magazine ends up being out there.
Great. Thank you, Eric.